Welcome back to Oppidan Talks. This is the first episode of a brand new second season. This is a podcast about entrepreneurs, visionaries, and those making tracks in the world of sport, music, acting, and business. A podcast perfect, we hope, for the school run.
On today's show, we're delighted to welcome Carrie Longton, best known as the co-founder of Mumsnet, proclaimed to be the UK's most popular website for parents. Mumsnet is a platform that helps millions of parents navigate the world of parenting. It is also a tool for change, helping to shape media campaigns, as well as swing votes in general elections. It is, as Gordon Brown said, a great British institution. Carrie, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. Happy New Year.
Thank you. So tradition goes, we tend to start in the classroom, start at the early stuff. So we'd love to know what your reports were like growing up as a child and a teenager.
It's not fashionable, is it? But I bloody loved school. I loved school. I couldn't wait to go. I was a May birthday, so I was quite late going. In those days, you didn't go till you were 5. And I was probably quite a bossy little madam. I could already read. I went to state school in Blackburn originally until the end of year 2 it would be now, and then we moved to Blackpool, which was quite posh, and I went to state school there, and I really enjoyed it. My reports probably would have said talks too much, which you'll get the gist of when you hear me carry on with this podcast, and then I got a scholarship and went to a private school, but we nearly all got scholarships. We were baby boom year 1965, so there were way too many kids in Blackpool to go through the normal school. So out of my year group of 90, 75 of us got scholarships. It's not like I was anything special. And then I think it was the first time that life hadn't come that easy to me academically. And I remember sitting in exam thinking, this Latin, it's not happening. Don't know any of it. Don't actually know any of it. And that was a horrible feeling. And that I think has shaped quite a lot of my life. What's that? Fail to prepare or prepare to fail, all that stuff. And I think to my kids now, I've got 3 children, and I'm all about, I don't care what results you get, but I just never ever want you to sit in an exam and go, oh my gosh, I absolutely know nothing. It's a horrible sort of elevator down your stomach feeling. You're thinking, I just can't answer any of these questions. So I think that was the beginning of me really working quite hard. And I quite like to meet myself. I was very driven. I was very driven as a young'un. But nobody particularly expected me to be clever. And I wasn't the cleverest by any stretch in my school, but I worked harder, I would say, than anybody else, which is a very bold statement. That's probably not true. And if they're ever listening, I'm sorry. But I worked really hard. I did work hard.
The causation between childhood and the career you choose is something we're fascinated about at Oppidan. Was it obvious at school and then when you went to Oxford that you were going to be a great entrepreneur?
Gosh, no, I didn't know what the word I genuinely, I don't think I knew the word entrepreneur. I definitely couldn't have spelt it. So no, I was brought up by teachers. My dad was a primary headmaster in a really sort of challenging school. Mum was a teacher. My mother left school at 14. My dad had gone to teach training college, didn't get a degree till much later. Mum got O-levels when I was, she got married at 18, had kids at 21. I came from that kind of background. Nobody in my family had been to university. My parents were not remotely pushy. I remember when I'd had to suggest Oxford at my school. It wasn't a school that ever sent anybody to Oxbridge. I actually genuinely thought Oxbridge was a place. I went to see I wanted to work in telly, bizarrely. That I didn't want to be an entrepreneur. I wanted to be a Blue Peach presenter. Hence the jumper. Can you tell? I'm still trying to channel that children's telly. I wanted to work, and I have no idea why, looking back, but that's what I wanted to do. And I was surrounded by teachers that anybody worked in TV. So I went to a careers evening and they said, oh, you've got to go to Oxbridge. And I said, okay, where's Oxbridge? Is it near Leicester? Is it somewhere, is it in the north or the south? I will go there. And so I went to see a teacher who'd heard of it, and she let me have a go. And it's only recently, I'm now 56, looking back, that they probably, it gave me a lot of confidence actually that I'd got in. But actually, looking back, they probably just wanted people from Blackpool who'd never been to, from a school who'd never sent people to Oxford. Duh. It took me a long time to realise that. But it was, that was part of that drive. And everything I did really from the age of about 14 was nothing to be entrepreneurial. It was about trying to get a job in TV. Although I always say those are very transferable skills. When I did eventually start a business, I was like, I've got no idea what I'm doing. No idea, can't do a spreadsheet, But and I still can't do a spreadsheet. But what you realize in business is you've got to know your audience, and you've got to know what appeals to them. You've got to be creative with how you serve those ideas to them. you've got to be authentic or else they can see through you. So actually, in time, I realized, but much later, that there were quite a lot of transferable skills. But starting a business was not remotely on my agenda. I just wanted initially to be a presenter and eventually then just to make TV shows.
I totally agree with the tie-in between the two. I think those skills definitely cross over. Would have loved to have been a fly on the wall in your first tutorial at Oxford. That
Oh
sounds
my
great.
gosh, I don't think you would. I remember, oh my gosh, I arrived and I was so nervous. I was so nervous. My parents were teachers and you had to go on a Thursday and they wouldn't take the day off because they were teachers and you didn't take a day off when you were a teacher. So I went on my own from Blackpool with a bike and a rucksack and my ghetto blaster in the basket. And then I cycled from the state. I mean, look at when my children went to university, oh my God, my poor parents and poor me, because my mother must have been distraught. Oh my gosh. And I cycled, and then I remember thinking, it's a joke. It's going to be a joke. When I get there, my name's not going to be on the door and it's going to be somebody's idea of a really funny joke. And I lived with that imposter syndrome for quite a long time, actually. So yeah, I don't think you'd have got much out of my first tutorial apart from me thinking, oh, help, help, help.
Well, you mentioned your kids. You've got 3, if I'm correct. And you're someone who is just totally plugged in, I'm sure, to the world of parenting. So having been a parent now yourself to 3 and worked the career you have, what are your big bits of advice?
Well, never call yourself a parenting guru, which I never have. I mean, the point of Mumsnet is that we were all experts. Nobody was an expert and every family's different. But when you are having a bit of a go with your kids, they go, call yourself a parenting guru. I don't call myself a parenting guru. My best advice, it sounds so obvious, and I think actually I'm at an age now where people are losing them. I lost my mum a long time ago. My mum unfortunately died when she was 50 when I was very young. But my friends are now going through that and realizing that your mother is the one that has your back, that nobody, and I love my dad and he's great, but nobody gets you and nobody has your back like your mum. And I think that's my main advice. Everything else will fall into place. You've got to keep them alive, ideally, if you can, and have their back and just love them and love them and love them. And have some boundaries and all those things, but just, I think it's about knowing that love, because you just don't get that from anywhere else. And I absolutely had that in spades, and I feel very fortunate that my childhood was very, very full of love. And in terms of sort of academics and stuff, I think that is that thing about rewarding effort, not results. As long as you've tried your best, you get D's. We just tried. My daughter's doing mock GCSEs now, my youngest. It's 3rd time round doing 3 sciences for a woman who did 1 science. Like, oh, please, no more chemistry. No. And, but she's worked really hard. And I don't know if she's going to do well or not, but, we tried. We had a good go at it. And I think that's what you want from your parents, is to say, that you absolutely have to try. I don't know what would happen if I had kids who didn't try. I think I'd find that hard. I'm very fortunate. And they would say that I'm probably quite pushy, but and I expect quite a lot. But I think that's the other thing, is expect things from your kids. If you don't expect anything, you don't get anything. And I hope that's not too pushy, but I just expect them to be kind and polite. Those are the 2 things every day out the car. Kind and polite. That takes you a long way.
Wonderful advice. Very good. I'm sure you've got lots of anecdotes about Mumsnet. We're going to get to those, but first let's go back to the beginning. I'm sure you've answered this question lots of times. Tell us a story then. How did it start? Why did you start it? Why did you get involved? And yeah, give us a sense of those early years.
How long you got? Once upon a time, there was an antenatal group in deepest, darkest Hackney, and we all trundled up pregnant with our first children. And my business partner to be, Justine, was pregnant with twins. She only made it to 1 session, and then she had her twins very early. The rest of us kept dropping like flies. We were so, looking back, oh my gosh, so clueless, as all new parents are, and focused on this one moment in life, which is birth, which is like such a nanosecond of life. I mean, there'll be people out there who don't believe that, but for me, it's like, that is just that, and it happens, it doesn't happen, it happens in a way. The rest of it is the hard bit. Anyway, long story short, I'd been working in TV, but Justine was working in the city and had then left, we wanted to do journalism. And so we were both trundling along with our newborns. I went back to work after 10 months to make ITV's Millennium Special, and she went back to that, and it just wasn't working. I had a husband who worked all the time. I didn't have a mum. I had a very lovely mother-in-law who would come down and do 3 days a week childcare for me, but it was too hard, and I actually collapsed 2 days before recording, I actually, literally physically collapsed. And my doctor said, do you really need to do this? I really think you should take a break because it's making you ill. So I stopped telly with I suppose the thought that I might eventually go back to it, because that's what I'd done. Everything in my life had got me to this point and I loved it. But at the same time, Justine was realizing that having a husband who worked all week and then her working all weekend also wasn't working because she was reporting on football. And she'd been to America with these 1-year-old twins and said, on the advice of our little antenatal group. I'm not telling this story very well. I'll go back. Okay, stop, cut. Once upon a time, went to an antenatal group. We all had children. Justine only made it to one. My business partner only made it to one because she was having twins. We both had other careers, but I was in TV, she was in journalism. It wasn't really working out. It was just too exhausting. And then it got to this point when she wanted to go on holiday with 1-year-old twins, and our little antenatal group that carried on meeting up, as these little groups do. We had no idea what to suggest. We'd gone through the phase. We had this great idea initially that we would give each other time off. So our little group would look after one person's child, and the other person would go and shop or sleep or have a massage. But gradually realized what we were missing was all this fantastic exchange of information. Actually, these people were the experts. We were all clinging to the wreckage together. We were like, when you have your first child, you've got all these other friends and even your parents, but nobody really gets it, like the people who haven't slept at all, or the person who's like 3 weeks ahead of you and knows how to put the breast pump together. It's like, oh my God, you know how to do that. It's amazing. So in the context of this, Justine said, I want to go on holiday with 1-year-old twins. We went, oh, you're mad. That's crazy. Don't do that. Anyway, off she went, had a really disastrous time, and said, rather than asking this group of 6 or 7 of us, I think they were at that point, wouldn't it be better if I could have asked the World Wide Web? And we went, ooh, what's that? What's the World Wide Web? And so that's really where the idea came from. And if it sounds so obvious now, but if you think this is 1999, so there's no TripAdvisor, there's no Google, there's no Amazon. I've still got the email that says you've got to try this amazing new site. It's called Google. Because before that we had Ask Jeeves, if anyone's very old, probably any grandparents listening might remember that one. And there was no peer-to-peer reviewing. So we decided we would start with peer-to-peer reviewing because we all made mistakes buying pushchairs. Pushchairs cost about the same as a small car. You've got no idea what you're doing. You ask your little 6 people, but So we started with 250 reviews of pushchairs, which we got by me going round every toddler group in North London and asking them to fill in a piece of paper, and then transferring that piece of paper to the computer that I'd only just bought and had to learn how to use and had to learn how to surf the net. And there was no broadband, so it was dial up. And so you'd literally start the computer, go make a 3-course dinner, and then come back and it might just have started, and then you'd put something in and it would crash. So it's a miracle. It's a Jesus miracle that Mumsnet exists at all. That was a very long answer to a very short question.
And why is it the success that it is still today?
Well, I think because it worked. I mean, I think this was the wild west of the internet. So this was the time when we started Mumsnet, boo.com had just crashed. At that point, we were sort of staking a claim for parenting, which incidentally had just become a verb. I don't know about you, it probably was. I don't know how old you guys are, but when I was growing up, parenting wasn't a thing. You were parents and you had kids. You didn't parent them, you were just parents. And so it was a bit like we'd had house decor and we'd had gardening, and parenting was just becoming a thing. And I don't know whether we played a part in that zeitgeist or we caught onto that zeitgeist. I don't know, it's so hard to tell. But I think people were starting to wonder how, people were living further away from family. They weren't surrounded by their parents so much, and it can be quite isolating. So I think it succeeded because it also, doctors didn't have time for you. You weren't living near family. And it's very, very isolating being a new parent. It's really, really, really hard, and you don't know what you're doing. And it's the most important thing to you at the time. And so I think people were struggling. So there were magazines that you could read, but who needs a magazine? You had your antenatal groups, but like for example, my daughter had eczema, which is not the end of the world. But actually, if you're the only person that whose child had eczema, it's really hard. And all I could do in those days was ring an eczema helpline, who were very nice. But if I could go online and meet somebody who had eczema in Scotland and someone had eczema in Ireland, someone in America where they've got some new fancy thing for it, suddenly I've got something valuable. So I think parents were quite evangelical when they found something that worked. They wanted to tell people, and parents were equally desperate to know what worked. So the fusion of that, and then the fact that if I went on and asked about eczema and somebody helped me, the next time I saw that question, I wanted to help them. It was paying it forward. So it kind of tapped into that, really.
Can I ask them? It can't have all been easy. I mean, it sounds wonderfully sort of successful as it's grown, but maybe you could give us some intel on what's been hardest about your journey with Mumsnet.
Bizarrely, I think the early years, although really, really hard, looking back were the most fun. I know you guys run a business, and I think that the beginning of a business is bonkers. I mean, we worked all the time and had small children and had a husband. So the idea that this was kind of, help with, but we set it up to try and have some work-life balance. And we did initially meet we'd have our meetings in the jacuzzi. We had no offices, but you were on all the time. You put the kids to bed and you would work. You would stay up late and work. When your husband came home, you would work. You were constantly, and we were very excited. So we'd get 2 new members, and we'd like, yay, 2 new members. By the time I left, I think we had 15 million or something ridiculous. But at that moment, it was so exciting, and you could monitor. If you had a little bit in the press, you'd see it go up, and so there was a lot of. We did try and raise money, and that was also very funny at the time because I had to learn what a venture capitalist was. I didn't know the jargon. We would be, we had nobody had any idea. It wasn't just us. Nobody. It was the internet was very young, and people were giving vast amounts of money out for nothing.
And did you raise money?
No. We raised because nobody would give us any, and also boo.com crashed. So literally, I think if we'd launched 6 months before, we'd have had offices in Clerkenwell. People would have given us a lot of money, and we would have failed. So in a way, it did us a favour, because the fact is, I think we raised £25,000, and that lasted us for 5 years. That paid our server costs. We didn't earn any money. I was still paying out for childcare. It was tough. I mean, it was, but then you'd get an email that says, I wouldn't have made it through the last 6 months without you. You've literally saved my life at Mumsnet. Thank you. And you'd have a little cry, a bit hormonal, and you'd think, oh, this is worth it. And you knew that you were onto something. I was very fortunate. I mean, I do a lot of talks to entrepreneurs. If I'd been a true entrepreneur, I would have been homeless and starving, because I did not make any money at all. I mean, the company made money, but we just put it straight back in. But I was very fortunate that I had a roof over my head and the money coming in.
I'd like to come to some of the, let's say, criticisms levied against Mumsnet in a second.
Oh, yeah.
But when you heard Gordon Brown or in 2010, when Mumsnet was in the press for helping sway swing voters particularly, and Gordon Brown said, how great an institution it was, rather than how did you feel, was that kind of the, I don't know, the zenith of all the work that he put into that?
It was a bonkers moment for sure. I mean, absolutely bonkers. To have the Prime Minister, we had Sarah, who I love, introducing Gordon, who I'd also met several. I mean, there was a time when we were literally in and out of Downing Street. It felt like on a regular basis, to the point where, am I allowed to say this? Did I promise I wouldn't? I don't know if I promised I would. I can say it now. It's not. But anyway, no, better not. But we were in and out of Downing Street a lot, and also I was on Sky News hilariously. I mean, it's not funny at all, the pandemic, but there was swine flu before this. Remember swine flu, and it was really dramatic. And I would be up there on Sky News, they're split screens, and there'd be basically the Chris Whitty of his time, and me. I haven't even got biology O level. It's like, and yet for some reason we were so, we were the voice of parents. I think because there weren't many other voices out there at the time. So in a way, yeah, it was an amazing thing. Actually, I think the lead up to our 10th birthday, we put a call out to Mumsnetters asking them what their best memories of the last 10 years were, and that probably was the zenith, because that would make every single time I would read those, I would cry. I mean, the things that people had done for each other. Somebody had lost a child called Maud, I'll never forget Maud, and sudden death syndrome. And somebody had organised a sponsored walk to raise money for that charity. And that is probably still going on to this day. Somebody had tried to commit suicide, and they'd raised money because her son had ADHD. And they were things that people had done for each other. The kindness of strangers is still the most important thing about Mumsnet, more than anything. And also, not that we created that, but just that exists is a lovely thing, because I think the world tells you that it doesn't. The world tells you that the people are mean and nasty, and actually the manifestation of the kindness of strangers. Yeah, Mumsnet's not perfect, trust me, and bring it on. Any gang of women or men is going to be tricky, but there were some real nuggets when you go, that is amazing, and if we hadn't built this forum, that might not have happened, and that is a lovely thing.
Well, let's
Go on,
lock into those.
hit me.
So no
I
specific.
might take the fifth. If I don't want to answer, I'm just going to take the fifth.
I mean, it's both a positive, I suppose, and a negative. But you've appeared on a number of TV shows, Outnumbered, satirized as this.
We were a question on Mastermind, I'll have you know.
There we go.
Thank you very much.
Not least because of the wonderful acronyms, the LP or DD, and I'd like to ask for your favorite. Why don't we ask now? What is your favorite acronym that you've heard?
Oh, AIBU. Am I being unreasonable? And YABU, you are being unreasonable, or YANBU, because, and again, I might get in trouble for this in this modern age, but I think it's a particularly female trait to ask, am I being unreasonable? I can only talk my own experience. I'm not judging anybody else, but in my family, I don't think my husband ever says, am I being unreasonable? I don't many do. Women are constantly second guessing themselves, I think, and it can be anything to do with, the peace process in Ireland to, should I go on holiday, or, I don't know, am I being supposed to expect my in-laws to behave? It can be anything. And I think that is by far the biggest forum on Mumsnet. And it's that what you do with a friend in real life, like, oh, am I right? Or am I being stupid? And I think that's a good one. That's my best.
And billions of views and hundreds of millions of members. It's clearly been a huge success. What do you say to those who say that it's a platform that fuels anxiety and provides a platform for the worst phrase I hear, which is pushy parents? But what's your response to that?
I think it's a platform, and I think we've always been very clear that we had apart from when we had the campaigns, and the campaigns were always grassroots led. So the campaigns, whether it was about rape awareness, or whether it was about autism, whether it was about let girls be girls and about over-sexualization of clothes, we didn't impose those campaigns. They always came from grassroots. But unless it was sort of putting a fence around something, saying this is our campaign, it was very much a forum, and with a very light moderation touch, which could mean that sometimes you did get quite strident views, but you were never allowed personal attacks. That's the one thing. You weren't allowed. You could swear, because women swear, my parents swear. It wasn't pink and fluffy. Parenting isn't pink. It's quite dark at times. It's quite irritating at times. But you weren't allowed to attack somebody. You could argue with their views, but you couldn't attack them as a person. And I think that was very important to us. But equally, it was very important that we let that freedom, that people could speak, and that has been really hard. And also that the libel laws are quite complicated, because you can't moderate 24/7. You've got to wait till someone reports it. But when something was reported, we had a team who looked at all those reports. It would have been much easier to make that what's the word? I can't think of the word. To make it an auto response, to make those responses like, oh yeah, thank you for your. But there were people all looking at those responses and trying to make an informed judgment. Were there strident views? Absolutely yes. But equally, you could then start another thread going, I am so miserable because and somebody, nearly always, I would say there would be somebody who would come and say, it's okay. And so much of parenting is like, it's okay, you're not a bad person. It's all right to feel that way. It's okay to just can't stand my 3-year-old today. I just doing my blooming head in, or my teenager, or my mother-in-law, or my husband, or my whatever it is. And I think sometimes it's someone saying it's okay. And the only reason I can say that is I've used it. I used it when my sister had cancer. I used it when I had cancer. And I was amazed at the extra mile that people would go. And that wasn't because I was Carrie Mumsnet. I would go in under pseudonyms. Sometimes my sister certainly had pseudonyms, and people would come up and they would message you offline and say, oh, I've got, I can help you with that. I could do this, give you that advice. And I think that is quite powerful. And any forum, Instagram can drive you nuts, Facebook can drive you nuts. But on Instagram and Facebook, you get people's bright, shiny lives. Very few people go, oh my God, my 3-year-old just peed the sofa. You're not going to put that on Facebook. Whereas you put that on Mumsnet, because you're anonymous, because no one's going to, and actually your best friend might be someone you're never ever going to meet. You would pass them in the street, you wouldn't know, but that person's giving you that sort of life-saving bit of advice about how to get the smell of pee out your sofa.
So Carrie, we'll finish up in a minute with a quick fire round that we always enjoy. But okay, to kind of finish on a slightly serious note, it feels to me, listening to you, like Mumsnet in a way has been a mentor to millions of mums out there. That's what it is. It's a sort of peer mentoring system in a way. That we're a mentoring company. What we're all about is the mentorship of children. love to ask you what mentoring means to you in that context.
I think Mumsnet, I think you're right, Mumsnet facilitated mentoring. I don't think we as an organization, I just think we could wander off and they'd just carry on without us. But I think back to the beginnings of it, the reason it worked is it's lovely to give advice, and it's lovely to receive advice, but it's actually even more wonderful to be to realize that advice has been accepted and useful. There's something very good for your mental health to be able to help somebody. It's the most important, it's the most powerful thing. So I do some mentoring and I always come away feeling so much better. I feel better than the people I've mentored, I'm sure. It gives you so much back. And I would encourage anybody, whether it's on Mumsnet or wherever you do, whether it's, to get involved in mentoring or just making it a point every day to try and, there's a line between telling people and telling them how to do things and saying they have to do it that way. And I think at its best, Mumsnet comes alongside you. And I think at its best, every mentor comes alongside you and walks with you as opposed to pushing you or leading you. And I think that's what I would say about mentoring, is about coming alongside people on their journey and just walking with them. I think
Wonderful.
you get more out of it and they get more out of it if you can do that. And I think that is kind of what Mumsnet was about. It was about that peer-to-peer, rather than somebody saying this is the way to do it, this is how you should parent. There are plenty of books out there that will tell you this is the only way you're going to get your child to do this, this is the only way to that, and they're all valuable, but you can take bits of all those and mix it in, and then the next child comes along, it doesn't blooming work. They're all different, these kids. They're not the same.
Well, that's you've teed me up nicely for a segue then into the quick fire round. So as quick as you can, you're talking about advice there. So the first one, the best advice you've been given.
Can I have two? I would say make a decision and make it work if it's business, and work will never love you back.
Work will never love you back. I love that.
Work will never love you back in the same way that your family will. So don't neglect those who do love you.
Very good advice. Most prized possession.
Obviously can't count family and dog. No, can't count family and dog. Okay,
No,
dog,
we're
sort of a
gonna...
possession. Photo albums then. Very boring, very obvious. Photo albums and moisturizer, probably.
Love it. Do you still keep your photo albums going? I'm always impressed by people who are good with photo albums.
Well, I'm just finally, it's been on my list. I left Mumsnet actually 3 years ago, full disclosure. And top of my list was to do my photos. I've done 2 books. I thought I'd start with 2020, thinking nothing happened. Oh my gosh, so much happened bizarrely. All those, dress up dinners at home. There's endless pictures of us all dressing up in our house and having dinner. So that was 2020. But no, I love, and I particularly love the old ones. I love the old ones with the real pictures in. Because I haven't got, those before you had a phone. Now everything's in the cloud. But most of my life, I'm 56, most of my life is not in the cloud. Most of my life was pre-cloud. So that's what I would rescue in the fire.
What is Carrie Mumsnet reading these days?
Oh, that's a very good question. Oh, my mind just goes blank when you say that. Isn't that awful? I read the paper every weekend, and that lasts me all week. That's about as much time as I get the Saturday Times, so I read that all week, sometimes the Guardian as well. And have I just finished? God.
That's good enough.
Oh, well, yeah, that's a good point. I'm reading a book about CBT and the menopause. It's not working, is it? It's not working. Not working at all. And I've just downloaded, I do Bible in a year for 3 years, which I'm proud of because I've read the Bible 3 times, which is amazing. And I'm now doing a thing called, if anybody wants to join it, it's amazing. It's called Lectio 365, and it's a little meditation every day.
Very good.
I love that.
Very good. Okay, nice. And very last question for you, your childhood hero.
Probably Julie Andrews. Love The Sound of Music. And I would in retrospect say absolutely my mum. I mean, like, if you in Americans would say 1,000% my mum. I mean, but only sadly looking back, too late to tell her. So if you've got a mum right now, pick up the phone, call her and tell her that she is your childhood heroine, because I would do that in a heartbeat. And I think mums deserve to be celebrated, and they are absolutely pulling out all that, you just don't realize. I said just last night, gosh, my mum cooked dinner every night and it must have been so boring, because I cook dinner every night. It's so boring. And I wish I'd said thank you. So there you go. Child
Well,
of heroin.
Walter and I will be on the phone right after this.
Call your mamas if you've got
when
them.
we put this down. They've been a great source of support to us, so we will be sure to thank them and give them a call today.
Any mum who's listening, can I say, any mum's listening, however you're feeling today, you are amazing. Just hold on to that.
Thank you. And thank you so much for sharing time with us. I mean, we could have dug into this for hours, so really, really appreciate you joining us on Oppidan Talks, and we look forward to seeing what the next stage brings for you. And thank you for all your advice, both to the parents and kids who are hopefully listening to this on the school run.
Thank you for having me. Sorry I talk too much. Can't help it. It's what my school report always said, and they were always right.
No, thank you.
Thanks, Carrie.
God bless.